Here is a number. $12,000. That is what you get if you save $100 every month for 10 years and do absolutely nothing with it. You put it in a drawer. You leave it alone. You come back a decade later and count it. $12,000. Now here is the uncomfortable part. That number is almost certainly wrong. Not because the math is wrong. The math is perfectly correct. It is wrong because saving money and just leaving it somewhere is one of the most financially destructive things a person can quietly do. And millions of people are doing exactly that right now, today. Feeling responsible, feeling disciplined, feeling like they are ahead of the game. They are not ahead of anything. This video is about what actually happens to $100 a month over 10 years, depending on what you decide to do with it. And one of these outcomes is going to make you feel like you have been lied to your entire life, because you have. Let us start with something most people already know, but do not actually feel. Inflation. You have heard the word. You have probably nodded along when someone mentions it. But here is what it actually means for your money sitting still. The average inflation rate in most developed economies over the past several decades has hovered around 2 to 3% annually. That sounds small. It is not small. At 3% annual inflation, $100 today is worth about $74 10 years from now. You have not spent a single cent. You have not touched the money. And yet, you have lost 26% of its purchasing power just by letting time pass. Your drawer is stealing from you, politely, silently, every single day. So the $12,000 you accumulated over 10 years, in real terms, you end up with something closer to the purchasing power of $9,000 from today's perspective. You saved for a decade and ended up behind where you thought you were. This is not an edge case. This is not a worst-case scenario. This is the normal case. This is what happens by default. Now you might say, okay, I will put it in a savings account. I am not completely naive. Fair. Let us go there. The average high-yield savings account, as of recent years, has offered somewhere between 4 and 5% annually. That is genuinely better than a drawer. So let us run that. $100 a month, invested into a savings account earning 4.5% annually, compounded monthly, over 10 years. You get approximately $15,200. That is better. You beat inflation. You end up with real gains. And you did it with almost no effort. Which is the honest case for just keeping money in a decent savings account. But here is where it gets interesting. Because what most financial advice will tell you at this point is to stop here. Open a high-yield savings account. Pat yourself on the back. Done! And what most financial advice will not tell you is that you just participated in what might generously be called the slowest race in history, and you ran it in second place. Let us talk about what first place looks like. The stock market, specifically a basic index fund, something that tracks the broader market, charges almost no fees, requires no expertise, and has existed in a form accessible to ordinary people since the 1970s. The historical average annual return of the S&P 500, the 500 largest companies in the United States, going back roughly 100 years, is about 10%. Adjust for inflation and you land closer to 7% real return. Let us use 7% to be conservative. Real returns. After inflation. No tricks. $100 a month. 7% annual return compounded monthly for 10 years. you end up with approximately $17,300 in real inflation-adjusted terms. Compare that to your drawer. You put in $12,000. You got back the purchasing power of $9,000. You lost $3,000 by being cautious. Compare it to the saving account. You got $15,200. Not bad. But the index fund beat it by $2,000 passively, automatically, with no active decisions after the first one. And now, we need to talk about what happens if you just keep going, because this is where the math starts to feel almost unreasonable. 10 years is not that long. If you start this at 25, you are done at 35. You still have potentially 30 years of working life left, maybe more. What if you just keep the money in the market and let it sit? By year 20, at 7% real return, your account balance crosses $41,000. By year 30, you're looking at over $100,000. $100,000 from $100 a month, which is the price of a decent dinner out for two people, most weeks, in most cities. This is the thing that is very hard to communicate without sounding like a motivational poster, but it is just arithmetic. It is not inspiration. It is not magic. It is compounding, which is what happens when your returns start generating their own returns, and those returns generate more returns. And at some point, the money is growing faster than you are contributing. Around year 15 or so, for most people running these numbers, the growth from the investment itself starts to exceed the growth from the monthly contributions. You are essentially no longer the engine. The money is. Most people do not know when that crossover happens for them. They have no idea. And that ignorance costs them real money. But let us not pretend this is simple, because there is a gap between the math and the reality, and it is a very large gap. And most of the financial content you will find online quietly ignores IT. The stock market does not return 7% every year like clockwork. It returns wildly different amounts each year, and occasionally loses 20, 30, 40% of its value in a single 12-month period. In 2008, the S&P 500 lost about 37% of its value. If you were a $100 a month investor and you looked at your account in March 2009, you would have seen numbers that looked like a serious mistake. Some people panic sold. They locked in those losses permanently and never participated in the recovery. By 2013, the market had not only recovered, but reached new highs. The people who stayed in were fine, better than fine actually, because the shares they bought during the crash were bought at a discount. But here is the honest thing. It is genuinely hard to watch a number drop by 30% and do nothing. It is not a character flaw. It is a human response, and no amount of reading about long-term averages fully prepares you for the visceral experience of watching real money disappear from a screen. So the question is not just what happens mathematically if you save $100 a month. The question is, what happens behaviorally? Because the math only works if you do not quit.